What's up everyone, it's your boy Walt. So in the previous two videos, we looked at both the beginning and the middle-ish section of Engage's story. Now, we're going to talk about the ending. So originally, I was going to compare the other modern Fire Emblem endings with Engage's ending and make some kind of conclusion based on that. But then I realized two things. First, if we consider modern Fire Emblem to be Awakening Onward, that would be 11 different endings I would have to talk about. 2 from Awakening, 3 from Fates, 1 from Echoes, 4 from Three Houses, and then the 1 from Engage. Screw that. Second, I kinda want to put aside the series history for this video, to challenge myself to treat Engage's story as its own thing and judge it completely on its own merits. That way, I can hone in to really focus on what Engage tries to achieve with its ending. But to make up for leaving out the other modern Fire Emblem endings, I'm actually going to go beyond just analyzing the story of Engage's final chapter, and we'll start this analysis at the beginning of chapter 21, as I believe that chapter is where the final stretch of the story begins. And it's also the chapter where the utter insanity begins. Before I start though, keep in mind this is just my opinion. If you think this final stretch of Engage's story, or Engage's story as a whole, is secretly an overlooked masterpiece, or maybe you think the story is just absolute irredeemable trash, or maybe you feel Engage's story falls somewhere in the middle, where you feel there's some parts that are done well, some parts that shouldn't be taken seriously, some parts that try to be serious but fail, etc, etc. Definitely let me know in the comments. I love discussing things like this, and it also helps me see things I might have missed or could have improved on in the video, and grow as a content creator. Also, if you guys really enjoy this in comparison to my usual content, let me know by leaving a like, comment, or subscribing. The benchmark I'll use is if this video gets either 1,000 views, 50 likes, or 10 different people comment on it, I may consider making more videos like this or talking about Engage even further. Alright, I delayed long enough. Let's dive into the insanity. So at the beginning of chapter 21, the insanity starts with... Wait, what's this? A genuinely good scene? Yes, that's right. I do think this scene right here is legitimately pretty okay. To be fair, a lot of it is technically just an exposition dump, but I do find Vale and Marnie's backstory to be pretty tragic, so I was invested in this scene just on that alone. But what really makes this scene brilliant is this little interaction between Marnie and Mauvier right here.
Since you're helping the Divine Dragon, you're probably gonna get kicked out of the Hounds.
I expect as much.
Yeah, well, I like being one of the 4 Hounds. As soon as we're off this boat, we're enemies.
You do hate me, after all. So, surely you'll be happier.
Right. So, yes. I'm done talking. This is a waste of my time.
I don't know how to describe it, but there's just something so human about this interaction. It just felt like two people just being people and having an authentic conversation. So when Marnie says that last line, I really felt for her and how conflicted she felt in this moment. And this continues over into the next cutscene, where Marnie starts questioning Zephia's actions.
Zephia, I know about Vale's past. Do you? You were alive way back then.
What?
I mean, I didn't know. When I helped you with all of these awful things, Lady Vale was all alone for so long. And she was so excited to see her family again. I loved it when you gave me praise. I loved it when you said we were family. I loved belonging somewhere. I loved the 4 Hounds. But this has gone too far. I have to do what I know is right. Praise or no praise.
Now, is this a little bit of a drastic turn? Absolutely. But, I like this exchange and this overall character moment for Marnie. So then Marnie ends up getting herself killed, and Mauvier freaks out. And then we fight. So yeah, it's not perfect, but I genuinely enjoy this little group of cutscenes. It has some legitimately quality moments and allows its characters to breathe and just be people. So, we're off to a good start, and I'm sure the quality of the story from this point on will remain consistently good. Right? So, Alear dies. Okay. Okay. Also, this is kind of a minor point, but this is a problem that appears throughout the story, so I think it's worth addressing. The cutscenes go on for way too long. It actually ruins the impact they were going for, because you can only expect your audience to be emotionally invested in any moment in a narrative for so long. If you drag it out, it just feels repetitive and you just want the story to move on. Anyway, we get a flashback and it's revealed that this isn't the first time Alear died. And yes, I know he doesn't actually die here, he just gets put to sleep. But I have one question regarding that. Why? He gets shot through the chest with a laser beam. How does that not instantly kill him? Is it because Lumera's there? Does she possess the nullified death ability but can only use it on other people and not herself? Or maybe the laser beam attack was just strong enough to almost kill him, and Lumera was able to nurse him back to health just enough so he didn't die, but he was too incapacitated so he had to be put to sleep. I don't know. I think the real answer is this is just really dumb. Anyway, we go into the afterlife, and Alear's like, Vale, you just have to believe in yourself. And she's like, wow, I never thought of it like that. Okay, let me try. Then she breaks free of the mind control and brings Alear back from the dead. I mean, it's as a corrupted, but unlike when others are corrupted, he's just normal because his soul is super strong or something. Is there even a consequence to this? It really was just that easy to just bring Alear back to life? Well, not exactly. It turns out corrupted don't live long. Alright, good job writers, you gave a consequence to not make that moment seem like some random Deus Ex Machina get out of jail free card. Very good. I wonder how the story will progress from here. He comes back to life again. As it stands, Alear dies. Then we see a flashback where he dies, but then actually no, he doesn't die. Then we see present Alear. He gets brought back to life by nonsense. Then in the very next cutscene, he immediately dies again, and then immediately gets brought back to life by absolute nonsense. And this time, there's no short lifespan or having to go to sleep. There's absolutely no downside to him being turned into an emblem at all. If anything, he benefits from dying, as now he has super cool emblem powers. So the story unintentionally treats his death like it's a good thing. Also, Marth says the most cringe line of all time.
Making you the 13th emblem, the fire emblem.
I may be alone on this, but I threw up in my mouth when he said that. But if you can believe it, this is not as crazy as the story gets. Engage has yet to reveal its final form. So, moving on, chapter 23. We fight Zephyia and Gris, and then they try to redeem Zephyia and Gris? What? Throughout the entire game, we see Zephyia and Gris being the most sadistic, monstrous people imaginable. Mauvier mentions how Zephyia will brutally punish him for disobedience. And just look at how mercilessly she kills Marnie. And then Gris is just Gris. So what even is this? Well, believe it or not, there is an explanation. See, I don't think Zephyia is being redeemed here. In some of her last words to Gris, she admits that what she did in giving Alear's group the crystal was done out of spite for Sombron. While yes, objectively it was a good thing as it helped save the world, I do think intention does matter. Thus, it's not out of character. She's still just as evil as she was before. The other purpose of this scene is Zephyia coming to the brutal realization that in her absolute obsession with wanting to have a child with Sombron for the purposes of having a family, she forgot about the family she already had with the Hounds. She did genuinely see the Hounds as family. She wasn't necessarily just saying that to use it as a manipulation tactic. But her idea of what a family is comes from Sombron, who murders his children on a daily basis for being weak, hence explaining her twisted and backwards view on what a family and what love even is. With Gris's final words revealing that he always thought of her as a mother, she comes to this painful realization and dies full of regret as the monstrous person she is. So if this was the writer's intention, I mean, to be fair, the building blocks are kinda there, and I can definitely understand what someone could get out of this scene. But for me personally, this is just too out of nowhere. None of what came before to set this up is given the time and care needed to make this moment stick. Throughout the game, What we prominently see is Zephia being an absolute sadistic monster, and clear as day enjoying every moment of it. She is an incredibly unlikable character. So when I get to this scene, I'm not gonna be like, oh wow, Zephia's a monster, but I wonder what could have been had she not made these choices, or been brought up differently. No! I'm gonna be like, why has the story come to a screeching halt so we can focus on characters that have been monsters the entire game? And what doesn't help is this is another one of those scenes that drag on for way too long. It feels like Zephia just goes on and on and on, and then Zephia and Gris just talk for what feels like an eternity. So look, I get why someone may genuinely enjoy this story moment, but personally I can't. It's just too ridiculous. And on a side note, I did watch all the DLC cutscenes to see if maybe Zestiria and Gregory could give me more insight for analyzing this moment, but nah, it really didn't. But wait, you may say. This moment is necessary for Chapter 24's plot to make sense. Well, let's talk about Chapter 24. 2 words. Time travel. To be completely fair, time travel was well established before in the narrative. In Chapter 4, we get the Draconic Time Crystal, mostly for gameplay purposes, and then it's stolen for a very brief period of time in Chapter 11 for the purposes of making the player feel helpless, and then we get it right back thanks to Zelkov. And the crystal Zephia gives you looks similar to the time crystal we already have. So with that, it's not so far-fetched to think that the crystal she made would also have the power to travel back in time, just to an even further degree. But honestly, you can remove the Draconic Time Crystal from the narrative and you would not be losing much. Maybe the Chapter 11 bit would be less impactful, but that's really all I can think of. Thus, even with that establishment, this still manages to feel like it just comes completely out of nowhere. It is an absolute whiplash moment where you're just like, what? But that's not even the problem. No, that doesn't even begin to illustrate the amount of plot holes that get introduced here. In fact, the story itself just becomes a black hole and collapses in on itself. For instance, if they had to go to the past to destroy the shard, that means the shard should already be destroyed in the present. In which case, how could the shard already destroyed she just sends things to attack the base? Then how would it still be helping in creating the barrier? Clearly sees all these people, and yet she only seems to remember Alir if the shard's already destroyed in the present. Or maybe she does. Present Alir has no reason to travel back to the past. Are we operating that multiple timeline here or a single timeline? Evil Alir wouldn't have to be multiple timelines. It doesn't seem to have an Alir wouldn't have to exactly Shadow's timeline after this story. It doesn't actually get rid of the time. Also, assuming the one Alir already sees that, like it would be secret. Wouldn't he tell people about what he saw and then... Oh my god. And what's truly tragic is this section actually does have some interesting story elements. At first, I thought Evil Alir was an idiot because he felt like he either had to commit the atrocities and fulfill Sombron's vision or die, when he could have easily left, which he actually does do later. But he's so conditioned from birth that this is all he knows. In his mind, there is no third option. In the environment he was raised in, it was either be strong or die, kill or be killed. So with his twisted logic, his actions make sense. So I understand what the writers were going for here with this whole nature versus nurture thing. But I'm sorry, I just can't. The time travel thing is just too distracting. And having a very minuscule plot element like the Draconic Time Crystal be considered enough setup for this is flimsy reasoning at best. Now, in any story, the time travel is never perfect. There's always going to be holes. But I think part of what makes this so ridiculous is that it was completely unnecessary. Just have Zephia's crystal actually drain the lake or open the mountain or whatever. Or better yet, get rid of that Zephia scene. Just have them fight corrupted somewhere random. The writers did not need to do this at all. Alright, I need a break from all this madness. Luckily, I can say with confidence the game doesn't really get any more insane than this. So let's just relax and... oh my god. Corrupted Lumera. Corrupted Lumera! And then at the end of the chapter they do her death scene again? It wasn't even said the first time Lumera died, and now... No. I refuse to analyze the story of this chapter. I won't do it. We're moving on. Alright, we're at the end. And of course, the insanity doesn't stop here. So now, completely out of nowhere, Sombron just starts talking about Zero Emblem, also known as the Emblem of Foundations. So I searched for a while. I scoured the Fire Emblem subreddit, Serene's Forest, GameFAQs, looked up videos, and thought about it for a long time. I've seen a lot of theories on who the Zero Emblem can be. Maybe it's Henri, Naga, perhaps even Alir himself. But there are always holes in every theory, and ultimately I came to the conclusion that I have absolutely no idea. I don't even think the writers know. But honestly, I actually don't hate the Zero Emblem concept because while it did come out of nowhere, it at least made me fascinated enough to theorize about it. No, the real insane part of this section is Sombron's backstory itself. I, for the life of me, cannot understand Sombron's motivations. So, his race was killed on his home world. He was exiled from his world and only had the Zero Emblem to keep him company. Then he was taken in by villagers, and then the Zero Emblem left. And Sombron burns down the village because of that. Now, to the best of my understanding, the reason that Sombron got angry at the villagers and burned down the village is this. From Sombron's point of view, the villagers thought Sombron was alone and decided to help him despite him not wanting their help. And because the villagers helped him, Zero Emblem interpreted that as Sombron relying on others. And since that's going against Zero Emblem's philosophy of self-reliance, he left. Now, that is all from Sombron's perspective, and the game knows that that perspective is the wrong way of looking at the situation. The actual reason the Zero Emblem left may align more with Alir's interpretation. Alir's interpretation being that the Zero Emblem realized that Sombron was okay and didn't need him anymore, thus leaving. But that's not even the issue here. The problem is, even by Sombron's own logic, the villagers wouldn't be in the wrong, it would be the Zero Emblem. As within Sombron's perspective, the Zero Emblem is an absolute moron. Because if someone goes out of their way to help you, and you either reject or try and avoid their help, but they decide to help you anyway, that's not a lack of self-reliance on your part, because at that point, you have no control over whether they help you or not. So it just becomes as simple as someone else trying to be kind to you against your own wishes. The fact that the Zero Emblem couldn't recognize the difference would make Zero Emblem a complete moron. And thus, even from Sombron's backwards perspective, he should be mad at Zero Emblem, not the villagers. Now, let's assume that there was no logic behind him burning down the village, and he just did it in a fit of anger and despair. After all, he does use the words, "I despaired," and he does mention revenge as a primary motivator for him starting the war in the first place. Keep this point in mind, as I'm going to come back to this point later. First, I want to talk about how this breaks Sombron's logic in another way as well. See, Sombron himself claims that all the violence and war is just a means to an end in achieving his grander ambition in reuniting with Zero Emblem. He even claims he'd leave Ilios alone and go off to different worlds because destroying Ilios was never his ultimate goal at all. So him doing things like killing his children by feeding them to the corrupted, as horrible as it is, he doesn't just do it for the sake of it. He sees his children as resources. He only gets rid of the ones that he finds are not useful and thus would be a waste and a detriment to him achieving his ambition, but he keeps around the ones he finds useful. But then, why would he raise the village to ash? How would that bring him any closer to his ambition? What practical purpose did raising the village serve? And in fact, why did he need to wage war at all? If his entire goal is just to travel to different worlds, he doesn't even need the rings. All he would have to do is, ironically, just fake being nice and become a divine dragon. Lumira seems to just take fell dragons in without questioning anything and converts them based on how she found Evil Lear, so it wouldn't have been hard at all. Then he'd have access to the Somniel, and according to the DLC, the Somniel already has the potential to travel to different worlds. But even if you consider the DLC non-canon, which is fair, I feel like he could have tried to manipulate things behind the scenes. I mean, the leaders of each nation are not the smartest, so I feel like they wouldn't be the hardest to manipulate. Starting an all-out war would probably only make things way harder for him. In fact, what exactly was his plan? He seemed to just try and brute force, send Corrupted and the Hounds to get the rings. Not really the smartest idea. In fact, the only reason he succeeds in getting the rings is because Alir and the gang are absolute morons. Why did they bring all 12 rings to Chapter 21? They could have at least left one ring behind, heavily guarded in the Somniel, if they knew Sombron needed all 12. I cannot for the life of me understand Sombron. But for the sake of it, let's assume everything Sombron does makes perfect 100% sense. Him burning down the village and starting the war were all logically sound decisions, and he absolutely needed to do all of this to get the rings to go to the other worlds. There was absolutely no other way the events could play out. Or, going back to the point I made before, Maybe Sombron was just angry and upset, and that's why he does everything he does. Maybe he just thrives on anger, revenge, and despair, and it's as simple as he's a being that thirsts for destruction and despises bonds of friendship. Either way, none of that would make Sombron any more sympathetic. In fact, it would just make him into an even more generically evil villain. Now, I personally prefer villains that, while they are clearly in the wrong, you can understand and even sometimes relate on some level to what they are doing. Villains with a little complexity. But there's also nothing wrong with the typical Saturday morning cartoon pure evil villain that just kind of serves as an obstacle. But if that's all Sombron was supposed to be, why did they waste our time with this overly convoluted backstory? And what doesn't help is this whole sequence is another moment that comes completely out of nowhere. So why does it exist? Why did I waste my time analyzing this whole scene when it was just supposed to be pointless fluff? Well, I have no idea, but I'm glad this scene exists because it's hilarious. And that sums up how I feel overall. This may come as a shock considering how much I just criticized this ending sequence, but I absolutely love it. In fact, I would go as far to say, even beyond this ending sequence, well, I'll admit it. I really did fall in love with Engage's story overall. Now, from what I've seen, there are two schools of thought when it comes to Engage's story. It's either this story is trash, or this story's fine, it's not supposed to be taken seriously, just have fun. Personally, I see where both sides are coming from. On one hand, there is a lot of evidence this story is supposed to be not necessarily a parody, but a lighthearted fun time that's not supposed to be taken seriously at all, considering how ridiculous some of the lines are. But on the other hand, for the most part the game does play it straight. The way the characters behave, the dialogue, the plot, and especially tone-wise, there's nothing that happens that makes it clear this is all supposed to be a joke. It gives the vibe that they want you to take the story seriously. And I kind of prefer it that way. I'm hoping that the writer's intentions were to make a serious story, because that makes the way in which it fails to do that an absolute riot. It just gave me so much entertainment. I was laughing and enjoying myself the whole way, just seeing how absolutely off the rails the story went. Now, does that mean I think this story is good? Absolutely not. This story is terrible. It is indescribably bad. But one criticism I see constantly thrown at the story is that it's generic. I do not necessarily agree with this notion. Well, I do and I don't, it's complicated. I think Engage's story leans so hard on anime tropes that it gets to the point of absurdity. The writers just threw in every cliche awesome thing they could think of and didn't worry about whether it fit into the narrative properly or even made any sense. Engage's story reminds me of those edgy middle school fanfics. For the person writing it, they potentially were being genuine and dead serious. And it's that absurd juxtaposition between intention and actual quality that would make me laugh about them for hours. While they may technically not be good stories at all, I'm glad they exist. Just like I'm glad Engage's story exists. It makes my monkey brain very happy. Now granted, there were times when the story was just dull and not entertaining at all, especially in some cutscenes that tended to drag on for just way too long. But for the most part, I think Engage's story falls nicely into that so bad it's good category, and it's able to be consistently entertaining in just how much of a train wreck it truly is. Well, that's the end of the video. Next time, I'm going to talk about Engage's gameplay, and I have a lot I need to get off my chest. See you all then. Peace.